Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Stan Lowe. I'm Zscaler's Global Chief Information Security Officer. I'm joined today by...
Hi, I'm Lisa Lorenzin. I'm Director of Transformation Strategy with Zscaler.
And we're here to talk to you today about digital transformation as well as how to implement that. And essentially the talk around is around the internet is everything. And we got this essentially because we talked about the Internet of Things, the Internet of this, the Internet of that. But it's turned out during COVID and the pandemic response that the internet has become everything for us. COVID has driven unparalleled changes in both for IT and security. Social distancing is critical and has become obviously a critical issue for business success because of the pandemic planning that we had or that we're undergoing. Continuity is one of the things that our business continuity plans didn't exactly take into account how we were going to address this problem, because typically, traditionally continuity plans centered around geographic events affecting a small number of individuals for a small period of time. It's driven our employees to work remotely and access applications and data from anywhere as quickly as possible in order to make sure that our businesses can continue to function. So there was already a mandate for transformation and moving applications and data in the cloud from the C-level. We're already pressing, the CISOs and CIOs, IT and the security guys to basically transform those enterprise business operations and to drive top-line revenue and growth by utilizing the promise of the cloud. That drove a lot of interesting activities for us with our employees, and they wanted our employees to make sure that they could, work whenever, wherever they could gain access using all different kinds of applications, and that has expanded exponentially, especially now. This has created some interesting paradigms for us from where we were pre-COVID, which I'm starting to call BC, and then AC, which is after COVID. So in our old world, we essentially, our applications went on in our data centers, and then we started buying things like Office 365 and moving those applications to the cloud. And we had ended up with a sort of a hybrid situation where we have some of our legacy applications in the legacy data center and some of the newer business applications that we're utilizing in the cloud, such as Workday, Amazon, Azure, AWS, ServiceNow, those types of things. That then created an issue with regards to network transformation. We had to figure out a way to be able to provide access for our employees to be able to access those applications and data. So the old hub and spoke going into the data centers and stuff didn't work. That all these applications are designed for direct to cloud. That then developed a problem or created challenges with network security because our old architecture of architecting and deploying no longer worked with this direct to cloud. So that drove us into a couple of interesting things. How do we do that? So from a security perspective and from an IT perspective, our users are accessing those applications from literally any device, from anywhere, over any location, over any network. So when everything, this is exactly what we mean. We're using the internet for our network, for our transport mechanisms, for our access, and we just, it's a really interesting challenge to overcome. So our employees are accessing those applications directly. One of the things that Gartner has essentially come up with is looking at this as what they call the SASE, which is Service Access Service Edge, Secure Access Service Edge, which means using the internet as your transport mechanism and pushing your application access and the security out to the farthest extent possible, which means your endpoint. So in order to be able to take advantage for your businesses, to take advantage of all of that the cloud has to offer, to be able to use the promise of the cloud for the expandability, that scalability, and that fast, that quick to deploy, you need to start looking. start looking at that from that perspective. So business is no longer connected in the old data center in the branches or in the headquarters or in stores. It's literally connected everywhere. So what do we need to do to be able to design and architect a system and a platform that supports this activity? So we all quickly realized when we all started pushing our individuals to work from home that our business continuity plans and the existing access methodologies failed, all intents and practical purposes, because essentially we were, the security stacks and the technology stacks were built around, those short incidents response times, those short duration incidents, those geographically specific incidents, and we built our access methodologies in accordance with that. So typically when we look at our legacy architectures, most of our traffic was destined for the internet. In the old days, most of our traffic was inbound. And then when we started moving things to the cloud, most of our applications, that paradigm sort of shifted where 30% of our traffic was inbound and 50 to 70% of it was outbound, which created some interesting problems for us. A couple of interesting points is that bandwidth is now cheaper than it has ever been. But adding more bandwidth to a legacy architecture is not going to help you with performance, because there's always that bottleneck of those access applications and the internal and network architecture that was designed to handle inside out, not outside in, or direct to rep. It's not equipped to handle the types of volume of inbound traffic that we're seeing with all the remote access. Essentially, the legacy network and our network topology and our architectures have become the very bottleneck that we created to allow our businesses to take advantage of technology to drive that top line revenue growth, and that transformation has ended up causing us more problems than it's solved. So what we need to do is think about a different approach to cybersecurity, moving from network access and access to applications and data from an old world network centric, moving that to, as our applications and our data and our employees move out, to a user centric platform perspective, which means applying policy and access to applications to users rather than to locations or individuals, and having that ubiquitous, consistent policy application no matter where the individual is, whether they're on net, off net, your device, their device, managed, unmanaged, or whatever. So looking at that perspective, to add a little bit more commentary to this has actually driven us to transform the way that we're doing business. We need to change our thought processes as security and IT professionals from not being technologists anymore, but being business-focused transformation agents and business enablers, changing from no, you can't, to yes, and here's how. Building services, instead of doing that, creating value for our organization. Instead of prevention, moving to detection and response. Going from a requirements-based methodology to doing innovation and fail fast, allowing the businesses to be able to use their applications in the way that they believe is best for them to be able to protect and drive revenue. Looking at it from the user's experience and not from the network's experience, and looking at it from our IT and our OT's experience instead of from our own. So to continue on with this talk and to provide a little bit more technical detail, I'm going to turn this over to Lisa, and she's going to take you from here.
Thank you, Stan. That was a whirlwind tour of where we sat 6 months ago,
Yeah,
and it's absolutely still true today.
Absolutely.
When we think about what has happened with the shelter in place, the stay at home, the need to move all of our employees, our colleagues, our work family to telework, it's really accelerating a transformation that was already taking place, away from that castle and moat network-centric world that Stan described, and towards a future of really any-to-any connectivity, where you need the ability to connect all of these new workflows, but you still have requirements for security and visibility that are as strong, if not stronger now than ever before. When we think about what's required to enable this kind of new paradigm, there are really 6 fundamental requirements for successful telework. The first one is, pretty obviously, a user working from home needs to be able to access all the applications required to do their job. And this can range from external publicly accessible applications, internet, software as a service, to private applications, which, as Stan mentioned, started out in the data center, but have now expanded to infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. Ideally, you want to give the user access to these resources without making them think too hard about how they get there. And in order to do that, we need to understand the context that the user is coming from. Identity has really shifted off-premise as well. So you have an internal identity and access management solution that can now also leverage the power, the scalability, and the flexibility of a cloud-based service. So whether you're still delivering that from an on-premise or a cloud-based solution, you also need to be able to tie in additional context, such as information perhaps about the device. Is it personal or corporate? Is it managed or unmanaged? Where's the user connecting from? Possibly even time of day. And all this enables you to deliver conditional access. The requirement from the user side is extremely simple. They want a fast user experience that gets out of their way. They want to be able to collaborate productively as well as access the internal resources required for that collaboration. And we need the ability to rapidly spin up use cases across not only our existing employees, but additional enterprise use cases such as third-party access for partners, vendors, contractors, or consultants. M&A scenarios where we're adding a new group of users to our environment, or collaborations between 2 organizations. And for all of these use cases, we need desperately to provide visibility to our administrators so that when issues arise, as they invariably will, we have the ability to resolve them quickly and with as little overhead as possible. The fundamental requirement that underlies all of these others, though, is a requirement for security and compliance that is at least as strong as, if not stronger than, where we're coming from, both to protect us against cyber threats and to protect our data from any type of unauthorized access. With a traditional network-centric infrastructure where you've got a stack of security appliances at the edge of the network, what we find is that moving to the cloud and moving to mobile workforce or telework now really presents a number of challenges that fall into 3 primary categories. One is an issue of scale on the VPN. The second is the additional risk introduced by exposing users' external traffic as they're now working from home outside that security perimeter. And the third is the user frustration with the set of security controls and the access paths that they have to take to get to their resources. And if we drill a little further into that last one, the traditional method of delivering remote access is really, as again, Stan mentioned, a bottleneck here. You've got a VPN concentrator that sits in between a stack of different appliances. It has an exposed inbound listener, so it needs denial of service prevention, and it has to sit in a DMZ with external and internal firewalls. Because it's appliance-based, it requires clustering, load balancing for a single premise, and possibly global server load balancing across multiple locations. The result is that a user coming from the internet has to go through 3, 4, 5 different hops just to get to a resource in the data center. That's multiple points that troubleshooting has to take place, multiple systems that have to be maintained and upgraded, multiple configurations that have to be adjusted as things change. And when we start to migrate applications to the cloud, if we don't want to publicly expose those applications, then they're running as infrastructure as a service or platform as a service, and users are connecting to them over a site-to-site VPN. This was fine when we were on campus. We had a reasonable connectivity model, but as we start to have users off-premise as well, now we've got to go through the traditional VPN stack, up the site-to-site VPN to the cloud provider, hairpin back down to the data center and back out to the end user. This infrastructure is complicated to set up and can delay migration to the cloud. It's also complicated to configure, so there's a lot of potential for error. If you have one set of access controls on your firewall, another set of access control within the VPN configuration itself, a third set of access controls within AWS security groups or Azure access control, you can really make it difficult to identify all the different moving parts that are required to add a use case. And of course, we still have the risk that is introduced by placing an endpoint on the network when that endpoint is now outside of your direct span of control. User frustration is also an issue here, and all of these challenges only increase as more and more users move to the cloud. You have emergency burst licenses, but they're generally only designed for limited relief. A snowstorm in the Northeast, a hurricane on the coast, they can only burst to the capacity of the existing appliances. So once you get beyond that capacity, you need to now order new hardware or deploy more virtual instances. And the bandwidth consumption of bringing these users to the internal applications goes up. But another bandwidth consideration that often is not considered is how are you protecting these users' outbound traffic? If they were on-premise, then their outbound traffic would be going through a stack of appliances at the edge of the network. But since they're off-premise, you need to do a full tunnel VPN to carry all that traffic back to the data center. Now you have two hairpins, one to the internet and everywhere else, and the other to any internal applications that don't happen to be co-located with the VPN. The inevitable result is your friction goes up, the operational overhead rises, and the user experience suffers yet again. One of the choices of how to address this problem is to leverage the same transition that we've made in our application for our security services. Let's move our security functions to the cloud. And a tempting solution might be to take your existing firewall VPN stack, virtualize it, and deploy it on a cloud provider. The challenge there is you haven't really solved the problem, you've just relocated it. There's still a single ingress point with backhaul required to all of these different locations. There's still an open inbound listener presenting an attack surface. You still have a limited amount of security controls you can apply at the network layer. And it's really like taking a bunch of DVD players, putting them in a pile and trying to build a streaming service. An alternate approach to cloud-enabled security is a cloud-native solution that assumes that users can be anywhere and applications can also be everywhere. We want to leverage the power of the cloud to deliver our protection natively inline, regardless of where the user is connecting, eliminate that inbound listener and the associated attack surface, and really move the functionality of both the outbound and inbound stacks into the cloud so that we can support 100% mobile workforce, but still acknowledge the reality that our data centers will be with us forever. And very few organizations are in a cloud. They're usually in multiple private instances across multiple public cloud providers. Zscaler has designed solutions to these problems based on our global secure platform. We can carry both traffic to internal, private applications, as well as traffic to external, publicly exposed applications. In both cases, we're moving away from that single ingress point, moving away from the open inbound listener. We've relocated the security function into the cloud, and this allows us to get away from that hub and spoke solution and stop thinking about securing the network. Instead, we're thinking about a direct-to-cloud world where you can write business policy that enables users to connect to applications no matter where the users sit and no matter where the applications sit. We have the ability to rapidly deploy by leveraging cloud scale and avoiding that requirement to rack and stack, to install licenses, do a bunch of complex configuration of multiple systems in sequence. So what we've seen is that we have one organization, a global logistics provider, who had about 40,000 employees around the world, and they had about 5,000 remote users before COVID-19. In the month of February, lasting into the middle of March, they increased their users 4 times in 1 week. So they went from 5,000 to 20,000 work from home users. And since then, they've ramped all the way up to their full 40,000 employee user base. Another great example is a much larger scale example, a multinational conglomerate. they were able to add 80,000 work from home users across multiple countries in 2 weeks. And they are, last time I looked, they were at about 250,000 of their long-term 300,000 employee deployment. In both cases, this was done obviously in response to COVID-19, but it's not going to go away anytime soon because they're realizing that having this flexibility for all of their employees will continue to benefit them even when we move beyond the immediate crisis. One of the major considerations as users start to work from home is protecting those users from cyber threats. And one of the aspects of COVID-19 that I personally find the most distasteful from a cybersecurity perspective is the number of bad actors who are playing on people's fear and desire for information to hide their malware, their malicious traffic in COVID-19 related information, whether that's sites that claim to be selling safety masks, applications that claim to give you a map of infections, or test kits or information about how to get tested. We're seeing attackers leverage all of these environments to try to deliver malicious traffic. And one of the benefits of a cloud-enabled solution is that if you find an attack anywhere, you can protect against it everywhere. We have the ability to leverage artificial intelligence and machine learning for the cloud effect, which enables us to extend this protection to over 120,000 unique daily updates. Some of that organically discovered in our own network and by our own team, others based on external threat feeds as we share threat intelligence and consume from others. The upshot is that we see over 100 million threats blocked every day for users going to the open internet. In order to empower employees to work from home quickly and securely, we need to meet all of those fundamental conditions that we talked about earlier. Secure access to all applications, regardless of whether they're publicly accessible or privately managed. The solution needs to be deployable quickly. Avoiding building these stacks of appliances, configuring them, maintaining them, coordinating them helps increase that speed of deployment. Direct access to resources and the ability to prioritize traffic ensures a fast user experience. And we can make sure the user never has to think about, am I on the VPN? Am I off the VPN? Am I on the corporate network, or am I connecting through some other means? We have the ability to view all of the traffic going out to the internet, to inspect that traffic for threats, to make sure that nothing good leaks out and nothing bad comes in, whether that is sandboxing, URL filtering, advanced cloud firewall for outbound, or data leak prevention and exact data match for watching the data that goes back and forth over that traffic. And on the inbound side, there's full visibility and granular control over who can go to what resource. That can be one of the most challenging things to tackle, considering that most organizations don't necessarily know all of the resources that are present in an environment, let alone which users are accessing what resource. And so you need a solution that gives you the visibility to see what your users are doing to begin with, and then organically build granular policies to support different use cases and whitelist permitted traffic. So this global visibility also extends to troubleshooting. Who is the user? What device are they coming from? What application are they accessing? How are they getting to that application? And what do we know about the user experience along the way? All of these are critical to ensuring a seamless user experience. There are several different benefits to leveraging a cloud-enabled architecture to deliver work-from-home access today, and also to enable additional enterprise security use cases down the road as we emerge from the current circumstances into whatever shape cybersecurity takes 2 years out, 3 years out, 5 years out. 100% cloud-based architecture ensures that not only can you get up and running immediately, but you have the flexibility to expand that architecture to new use cases, and that that architecture can evolve as your enterprise evolves. When we come out of this, are we all still going to work from home? Are we going to go back to going into the office every day? There's almost certainly going to be a mix, and you need the flexibility to deliver a good experience and full protection either way. A cloud-enabled solution that is built for user productivity means offering fast, seamless access to the end users. So they don't have to think about how they connect to a resource or where that resource is located or whether that's a public or a private resource. They just connect and go. And this allows you to minimize operating costs, which is especially critical in today's world where the economic impact of COVID-19 has us all tightening our belts. Removing the need for that stack of appliances, shifting that load into the cloud, reducing the management overhead, and ensuring optimal user productivity really all go a long way to help make the cost streamlined versus the benefit that's provided. We've seen business continuity plans from large enterprises in a variety of different verticals, whether this is logistics, energy, the oil and gas sector, global manufacturing, finance, or the public sector. Many organizations have been leaning on a cloud-enabled solution and working hand in hand with the components of their ecosystem to design a solution that not only meets the needs of today, but scales to provide full functionality for the future. So Stan, it looks like we have a few minutes. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you're seeing CIOs do today?
Sure. So again, from our perspective, we're not really, nobody's recommending a rip and replace. What we recommend when you began doing this transformation, whether you've been forced into it or it's been something that you've been planning, is to pick use cases. Pick stuff that you know, if you're an Office 365 deployment, use that. Or if you're using the ServiceNow or Workday, or you're storing using the Office 365 applications on either Azure or S4HANA, is pick those small use cases and get started, because you're gonna have to do this you yourself or somebody's gonna force you to do it. And it's a much better experience both for you and your businesses if you plan for this to happen and you actually take steps now to make sure that you're prepared to support your businesses to use the tools and technology that the cloud provides them to protect and drive revenue. That's the key. You either help your businesses or your businesses will go around you and you'll become irrelevant. The whole key to this is making sure that you're viewed as a business enabler, that you can provide the services and the commodities for your organizations to protect and drive revenue, so you can continue to do what you need to do to make sure that you all have an awesome experience using technology. And we think that the cloud and those cloud-enabled service offerings are just what you need to do that.
So that ties right into one of our questions from the audience. How do you prioritize budget spend? Speed versus security, storage versus compute? What should a C-suite prioritize first?
So, as I think speed and compute power and bandwidth, those are all pretty much commodity spends now. So that's not really a large budget, and storage is not really a large budget consideration. What you need to focus on from a spend and planning perspective are business applications and making sure that you have some type of secure access for those applications, both in the legacy data center and those are that are in the cloud as SaaS applications. Again, the concept is pick a couple of use cases that are important to you that you already have in flight and apply these methodologies to that. That way, you've got a budget set aside for it. You've got a project plan set aside for it. You are already doing it anyway, and this can help make that transformation much, much faster and much more secure. Makes
sense. And I think we have time for one more question, which is along the lines of, do we think that remote work is going to taper back off once this situation resolves, or do we think that work from home is going to persist into the future? What do you see enterprise security looking like 1 year, 2 years, 3 years down the road as we move through this?
Yeah, I think you're right. We're going to see a hybrid. I mean, most organizations were very reticent about telework. They believed that the individuals that were actually teleworking weren't that productive. But now we realize, based upon what we've seen today, not only are they productive, they're much more productive than they would be in the office. And organizations are looking around and going, hey, do I need this space anymore? There's large cost ramifications for organizations to move to either a partial telework or more remote telework or a full-time telework like Twitter just did. I know
Yes.
my own daughter, who's the comptroller for an investment bank in Chicago, they've said, you know, hey, listen, we don't think we're coming back to the office. And I know for a fact these guys were spending about $6 million a month in rent for a downtown Chicago location. So that's a huge
big consideration.
And that's driving decisions at the board level, and it's also driving decisions in the C-suite. Do we need this? Do we need the space to be as productive as we need to be? Now, again, there are going to be organizations that won't be able to do this, healthcare, manufacturing, stuff like that. But for those organizations that can, I think we'll see a hybrid. But I think the days of open office are gone. It's returned to office space and cubes.
I see a parallel there between when cloud first came along, everybody said it would kill the data center. And instead we end up with resources in the data center and in the cloud. Now we've got everyone working from home, but I believe that we're never going to go back to fully in the office with as the minimal level of remote work that some organizations had, but we're not going to shift all the way in the other direction either. So both scenarios will be with us forever, and we need to be building architectures that recognize that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's all we have time for today. Thank everybody for taking time out of your busy days to join us and letting us talk to you about this. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself or Lisa, either through LinkedIn or through my email is horribly slow, SLOWE at zscaler.com. It's a naming convention, nothing I can do about it. But feel free. And
I'm a little easier. I'm Lisa at zscaler.com, so you can always reach me there.
So thank you, everybody. Have a great day. We appreciate you coming today.
Thanks, all. Be safe.